Right. Hey, how are we doing today? This is your host Sonya with the Remember Who You Are 222 podcast. I have my guest Sean here with us today. He is a U.S. Army veteran, and he basically is now a shaman and a podcaster. So his podcast is called Recover Out Loud, and it's awesome to have you here today, Sean. Definitely thank you for coming on to my podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I'm definitely interested to hear your story because I know you've been on a pretty intense journey. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell the listeners like kind of your story and how you got into what you're doing now?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So my name is Sean Young. Like Sonia said before, I'm from Maryland. I live about an hour west of Baltimore. I kind of grew up in this area, not too when I was a kid, and I lived with my grandparents because I was taken away from my parents when I was very young for abuse, and that kind of shaped this deep-seated fear for authority figures, right? Real deep-seated fear for authority figures. Um, and so when I moved from my parents' house to my grandparents' house, they were Mennonite, so pretty much like a step above the Amish. We didn't have, I mean, we had a car and TV and all that, but we lived by really strict rules. My dad ended up getting custody of my sister and I about 4 years, about 6 years after we moved in with our grandparents, and we moved up to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is like right on Lake Erie. It's pretty much equidistance between New York and Ohio. And it was a big culture shock for me going from living in the backwoods to a city, you know. And so living and growing up in that was a bit traumatic because I didn't know how to, I was a target for bullying a lot when I was growing up because I was a country kid living in a city with an accent and I wore high waters, right? Like I used to get the question all the time, "You waiting for a flood?" You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, but shortly after that, I learned to adapt, and learning to adapt was probably my biggest skill because when you learn to adapt, you just become a chameleon. You become a face in the crowd, and nobody knows. But with that, you definitely notice the face in the crowd feeling. You notice that you're nobody special, that you start to believe and fill your head with those things of like, I'm nobody special, I have nothing to offer the world. And that's kind of like how I carried myself. In the background at home, my dad was very abusive. He was a truck driver. But when he would come home, he would get drunk, be very abusive. I remember multiple times him taking me to the backyard and beating the dog shit out of me. And the crazy thing was, nobody in my neighborhood knew. My stepmom didn't even know. To this day, she only found out because I told her, and it was really fucked up. And so, as I started to progress as a teenager, the fundamental lessons of learning about trust and learning about love, like parental love, was not there. I didn't have a foundation of trust. I didn't have a foundation of love, but I severely craved that love. I wanted that connection. I wanted everything about it because I didn't get it as a kid. And the more that I looked after it and tried to find it and all that stuff, the more it just seemed to be further away from me. And so at the age of 16, I was kicked out of my father's house, not for anything crazy. It's who my dad is. And so I ended up moving in with my grandparents and I found religion. So my grandparents ended up going from being Mennonite to being Pentecostal. So there was a huge personality deficit there. There was a huge identity deficit there. I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. Like, period. Even as a kid, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And so I ended up going to graduating early out of high school, and the school that I went to was run by the church that I went to. Great, it was a small school. I graduated in a class of three,
Oh wow.
and Yeah, yeah,
That
and
is
a class
wild.
of three. Yeah, yeah. And I was looking at, okay, what is next after high school, right? Obviously, I have to make a move. And the pastor of my church took me to this Bible college in Ohio, and I fell in love with it right away. I was like, this is where I want to be. This is who I need, surround myself with. And my grandparents told me, you got to tell your dad. Well, I told my dad, and he didn't like that. Now, backtrack 9/11 happened. I was in seventh grade. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a Marine because my grandfather was a Marine. And I knew where we were heading, right? Even at a young age, I knew where we were heading. So I wanted to be a Marine. Um, so with that in the background, my dad was like treating me as if I was a Marine or as if I was a service member, even though I was not in the military and he had never served in any capacity. So when I told my father that I wanted to be a pastor, he said, "No, you're going to go in the military." And him and I thought about this like for days. He drove from Erie, Pennsylvania down to where I was living, about 8 hour drive, and drove me to a recruiting station. And we didn't leave until I signed a contract. So I had no agency over myself. My autonomy had been stripped away from me. And I joined the Army. I initially went to the Navy because the Navy office was open. I walked in, and the first words out of their mouth is, "We need to see if you're smart enough to join the Navy." And I said, "Absolutely fucking not. Absolutely not." Right? Like if I'm already being judged walking into a recruiting station, this is not where I want to be. And so the Army was open, and I went in, and the recruiter asked, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need help." Right? So um, I signed a contract that day, not a job contract, but a contract nonetheless for the delayed entry program. I ended up going to MEPS, signed a contract to be a forward observer in the Army. I had no clue what that was, and I was told that I would be sitting in an office in New York City watching bombs drop on a TV, and I was like, "Dude, that's sick. That's where I want to be." I didn't want to be in a combat MOS. I didn't want to be in combat arms, right? I saw what it did to my grandfather, who was, in Vietnam, and I just didn't want that, right? So, but I went to basic and then at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, the worst duty station in the whole country. Probably the worst state in the whole country. Oklahoma's terrible. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it sucks. um,
I don't think I have.
uh, don't go. Don't go. There's nothing there. But I spent my basic and my AIT there, my advanced individual training, and I learned a bit, but it was still horrible. And then I ended up picking up an airborne contract to go airborne. And so I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and performed my duties to become airborne qualified. I think, like, I always tell this story because people are like, "Why'd you jump out of a good plane?" I mean, that's the common question. And I say, it was an adrenaline rush, and it was $150 that I didn't have before.
Mm.
Like as a private and like lower enlisted, you don't make a ton of money. So like whatever you can get. And so I ended up graduating airborne school and then got stationed in Vicenza, Italy with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And I deployed twice with them, first in 2007, 2008 to Afghanistan. A documentary would be made about my platoon, well, two actual documentaries would be made about my platoon's efforts in that deployment. And then I deployed again in 2009 to 2010 with that unit. Pretty traumatic experiences all around. When I got back from both deployments, I was like hitting the ground running, just drinking. Like I was already a full blown alcoholic by the time I deployed my first deployment, but it got worse every single time that I came back because I wasn't addressing anything. I mean, I was going to counseling, but I wasn't talking about anything. I was talking about my daily life. I wasn't talking about the actual struggles that I was facing, like all the trauma and the shit when I was a kid. But I got back from my second deployment, and I met a woman, and she was awesome, great. We ended up getting married. I got stationed at Fort Bragg with the 82nd, and she met me halfway, and we ended up getting married. Once we, like, literally, probably the second day after I signed in from leave, we found out that she was pregnant. So I was like, I have this kid coming into the world. I was terrified. I was like,
Mm.
I don't want to turn out like my father. Right. That was a big fear in my head was I don't want to turn out like my father. So after that, after I get reassigned and we find out that she's pregnant, I get slated to go on another deployment 5 months after I get to the unit. And so February 2012, I ended up deploying again, and that was the most traumatic out of all the deployments I did. Um, I watched my best friend get blown up in front of me by an IED, lost his arms and his legs. He would eventually pass away. But that traumatized me for 10 years. I didn't talk about it. I numbed myself with alcohol or whatever I could get my hands on. On top of that, like I put his picture on the wall, right? So every time I started feeling down, I would touch it or go look at it. But the thing was, like, I wasn't doing anything about it. I wasn't talking about it. I was just numbing up, just armoring up, just continuously, because that was the stigma in the military. Like,
Mm-hmm.
talk about your feelings, but if you talk about them, you're a bitch. And like on top of that too, like I was in a leadership position at that point. I was
Mm-hmm.
terrified to lose that position. So I just didn't
Right.
talk about it.
So you feel you got to be the strong one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get back from that deployment and like I wasn't able to go home for the birth of my daughter because at the time the Army was doing short rotations downrange. So I was there for 7 months on that third deployment. But I got home and I had this brand new baby, and I knew that I didn't want to be like my father. So I just quit drinking. But once again, I wasn't in any programs. I was just roughnecking. I hated everybody. Um, but I just really didn't talk about it. So I go on on a fourth deployment with a second deployment with the 82nd, my fourth overall, and that was like the easiest one. We go to Department of State. We didn't do much. I mean, we were in a four-star hotel in the middle of Afghanistan, catered meals, gyms, or 3 gyms in the hotel every day, and it was awesome. It was the life, but with idle hands doesn't always work. And I started thinking, I was like, I'm not necessarily in love with my daughter's mom. I love her, but I'm not, and that created a whole shitstorm that I wasn't prepared for it to start, and that was really traumatizing, right? Like, and I feel bad for the way that I did it, and my daughter's mom and I were great friends now. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was more than 10 years ago. But I've apologized for the way that I went about it. Because the way I went about it wasn't great. I did things to make her hate me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not the right way to go about it. I mean, we have a kid together.
Mm-hmm.
So I got back from that deployment and um, started drinking really heavily again. I had nobody to be sober for. My family's gone. Uh, and I just had nobody to be sober for, so I started drinking again. And in that period of my life, I just didn't really care about anything at all. I didn't care about work. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about anybody around me. Once that marriage was over, I literally jumped right into another relationship. Ended up getting married 3 hours after I got divorced. Like literally
Wow.
got divorced at noon, came back, and I was remarried by 3.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best, not the finest moments that I've ever had in my life, but lessons nonetheless. And so in that time, right, like I said, I just didn't care. Um, but I had stopped drinking. And one of the things that I noticed is when I stopped drinking, life started to get a little bit better, right? Like I was getting promoted at work. I was able to go to those leadership schools that I always wanted. I was excelling in PT. I was, taking care of my guys, but my home life just sucked because I wasn't addressing anything. I was
Mm-hmm.
just, like I said, masking up.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting promoted to staff sergeant. And I was so excited because when I was a senior E4, all of the leadership said you're not leadership material. You're, you're a Joe hugger because I treated everybody the same. I didn't treat anybody any different. And because I guess I didn't possess that killer quality that they look for in leaders. Well, I got promoted to staff sergeant, and one of the guys that told me that I would never amount to an NCO, was the one that had to pin me.
Oh
and it
wow.
was great. Yeah, it was a huge fuck you to him, like, but I did it out of spite. Everything that I did in my career after a certain point, I did out of spite. Like my dad ended up seeing the documentaries I was a part of, and he was like, "When are you done?" And I said, "Not till I'm in a box, so the army doesn't want me anymore. You created this monster. Now you're gonna have to live with it." And so when I got promoted to staff sergeant, I ended up getting my list opened up to me where I could go. And I wanted to be as close to my daughter as like physically possible. And she was at Fort Lewis, Washington at the time. And so my list did not include Fort Lewis, Washington, which sucked. So the next best thing was Anchorage, Alaska at 425. And so I got assigned there. But as soon as I got there, it was like all of my physical symptoms from all the injuries I accrued in my career came to the forefront.
Mm.
And I had to face all of them, right? And so, like, I was experiencing a lot of symptoms from traumatic brain injury. And I went to go do an NAM test, which is for anybody who's not a veteran, is a pre-deployment memory test where they gauge your short-term, long-term memory as well as your reaction time and a few other things. I miserably failed all of it. And so they took me in the back and they showed a lot of concern around like, we need to get you better. But I didn't think my chain of command would be supportive of me because that stigma was still very much alive. And I went in and I told my chain of command like the severity of the injuries because like they don't pull normal people in the back, right? And they were very supportive of it. They were like, "Yeah, dude, go get taken care of. We'll take you off the line. We'll put you in the training room. You'll be in a training room NCO. Everything will be fine." So I started my pathway to recovery, I guess you would say, um, in that moment. But I still wasn't sober. I still wasn't working a program. I hadn't had a spiritual awakening at that point.
Mm.
Um, I was just like living life on life's terms, but still like very much hating everything. And toward the end of 2017 into 2018, I started noticing some things were off in my marriage. And I went and talked to my second wife at the time. And I just brought it to her attention. I told her some of the things that I noticed bothered me. And just like you and I are talking here, and then it blew up. Just
Mm.
out of the blue, just blew up. And that started a separation between us. And then we ended up getting divorced. I didn't get remarried. But in between the time of the separation and the divorce, like I hit this just all-time low of depression because of the symptoms of my traumatic brain injury, because of the stuff going on with my wife. I ended up finding out that she was out there cheating on me and just like never stopped, right? Like it just she just kept going. It really fucked my head up. And Cinco de Mayo 2018, I had a relapse, and that relapse was up for a month, and I drank every single day. I didn't eat shit. I just drank every single day. Like in the back of my mind, but in retrospect now, I could say I didn't want to be alive at all. Like I had no motivation, purpose, or drive to be alive. And so the first of June 2018, I had a suicide attempt. And when I came to in the hospital, the doctors weren't there. My first sergeant was there, and he told me how dumb I was. Right, like I'm already down in this hole, and you're
Right.
just gonna kick me further down. It's fucked
Yeah.
up. And then my ex-wife was there, and she said the same thing. You're dumb, and it's like all the people that I wished would have like held their hand out and said, "Dude, you're okay,"
Yeah.
weren't there. Didn't show me that empathy or compassion that I really needed. And so my first sergeant took me home and dropped me off at the house, which that is the wrong answer. Period. That is the wrong. You don't do that. And so I was in the shower and I was like, well, I didn't succeed the first time. I might as well finish this shit off. Then I got a knock on my door, and I went downstairs, and it was my buddy Jeremy Shadewald, one of the guys that worked for me, and he asked if I was okay, and I said no. And he's like, I'm going to take you to my house until you're okay. And he saved my life. Honestly, he saved my life. And It wasn't until very recently that I actually called him up and I thanked him for it. Because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was at his house, I just sat there and I observed what normal looked like. And then I saw me. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing normal about me or about my situation right now. And I need some serious help. So I went and I checked myself into the On Post mental health clinic, white suit, white walls, and the basement, eating all the healthy stuff, getting all the good stuff that you need. And that was for 11 days. And it was 11-day reprieve I needed. And I did a 11-day intensive outpatient treatment. And that was great. But then I had to go back to work,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I had to go back to the bullshit. I had to go back to regular life. And that was much more easy to handle because like I had some tools and skills to use.
Mm-hmm.
So while I was in the middle of all of that, the Army informed me, hey dude, you're going to be medically retiring or separating. So they started the med board. And that was a part of another reason why I attempted suicide was because I was losing all the sense of purpose I had. I was losing the career I had. My daughter had a phenomenal stepdad that was like a million times the man I would ever be. I made all these excuses and I couldn't find one to stay alive. And so um when I got out of my intensive outpatient program, I was informed that my chain of command was pursuing UCMJ because of the method in which I attempted suicide, and that would have pretty much like stopped my med board process. But luckily, the post commander kind of was like, "Hey, this dude's been through a ton. We can't help him." And med board, or and keeping him in the military to punish him is not the right thing. So they let me continue my med board. I retired in 2019. But I tried to find a job. I tried to set myself up for success when I got out of the army. And
Mm-hmm.
like it was hard. It was difficult. It I didn't get it right away. I didn't get that success right away. And it wouldn't come for a while, to be honest. I applied 1,000 different positions all over Anchorage. Just could not get one. While I was in the process of med boarding, I did meet somebody else after the divorce was final. We didn't get married right away, so that's not part of my story.
Yeah.
We ended up waiting some time. We ended up getting married. But
There's no
the
judgment
fourth,
here either way.
yeah,
So,
it's my story. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So that I think that we learn from the decisions that we make, or I'd like to think we do. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely have. So um, the Fourth of July, Independence Day, 2019, I relapsed my last time, and I was sitting there, and my at the time wife was like, "Hey, do you think you're okay to have a drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." You know, different place, different situation, different people, but it was me. I was the problem. It had nothing to do with my scenario or my situation or my scenery. It had everything to do with me. And so I told her I'm going to have one tonight. Well, one led to four, and
Mm-hmm.
then the next night two led to five. And then I was back on track. Same way I was drinking before. And that relapse lasted 6 months. And I went from being a model employee at the job that I was working to them pulling me in the office saying, hey, Sean, you called out X amount of times in the past 2 months. We have a problem with that. You know, pretty much they had me on a probationary period because of the just the complete 180 from who I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was asking me if I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was nobody was checking in on me to see if I was okay. So I was just like, fuck it, nobody really cares. I just kept drinking. And the 7th of December was the last drink that I had. And I'd worked all day. I hadn't eaten. I come home and like it was right around Christmas time. I got that Christmas bonus. You know what I mean? Like, so now I could afford to buy two bottles of Hennessy versus one. And before I even got out of the car, I cracked the first bottle and I drank it. An hour and a half later, I was outside of my house in the middle. December in Alaska, no shirt on, no jacket on, just steaming pissed. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what was going on. And I walked in my house and it looked like Tasmanian devil went through that motherfucker. Like there was
Dang.
holes in my walls. All the stuff that I had collected was broken. Like I had guitars for music therapy that were shattered all over the place. Something happened and I didn't know what happened. I looked down the hallway and my wife is on the ground. Uh, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I knew like I was pissed. And I knew the next right move was to get the fuck out so nothing bad happens. But apparently something bad had already happened. I just didn't remember. So wake up the next morning and I called my wife and she's like, "You hit me." I didn't remember that. I'm pretty sure you picked up on that, but like I didn't my knuckles didn't hurt. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm hitting somebody, I'm going for the ledge. But she told me that I didn't. And so she's never lied to me.
Mm-hmm.
I called the police. The police came and handcuffed me, took me away. And when I was in jail, I blamed everybody for my problems, my alcoholism, my mental health disorders, all that shit. Just blamed everybody for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this old native man looks at me and in jail they called me Viking. And he was like, Viking, shut the fuck up. You created all these problems for yourself. When you can come to terms with that and accept that, you'll be okay.
Oh
And at
wow.
first I was like, yeah, at first I was like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you know who I am?
That just gave me
Do you?
chills though. The fact that he was
Right.
even telling you this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, "Who are you?" But then I stopped and I was like, "Dude, this guy is right." Like I'm pretty reasonable when I get level-headed, and I was like, "He's right. I created all these problems that I literally ran down the list of all the things that I had fucked up." And as soon as I did that and I took inventory of all the things I had done wrong, I got a tap on myself, and it was the prison guard, and he was like, "Pack your bags, pack up your stuff. Your bail got posted." What? Like that is a crazy synchronistic moment. So from
Yeah,
that point on,
synchronicity.
yeah, yeah. So from that moment on, I dedicated myself to acquiring sobriety. I entered into a veterans treatment court where I was held to a standard that I needed to be held to. There was so many programs I had to do. I did anger management twice because I felt like I might have missed something the first time. I did this other class called moral recognition therapy, which really like kickstarted my recovery and like it taught me a lot of good life skills that I needed. And it also held me accountable to the bullshit that I had done in my life. I went to AA multiple times, almost every single day of the week. I did structured hours, everything like that. And I graduated 9 months later in October 2020. And I started up the Alaska Therapeutic Court alumni processing group for our veterans because there was none. And then I helped kickstart our mentor program in that court in Alaska. And I was starting to give back to the community because I had taken so much from the community and I hadn't given anything back. So I started giving back to the community. I started my podcast in 2022 because I had gone in and I got peer support certified. And part of the requirement for peer support is to share your story.
Mm,
I was so terrified. God, I was terrified. I thought I was the worst person, right? And
mm,
this was during the pandemic and where we didn't have like in-person shit. So I was behind a camera in my house, just like admitting to these things and talking about these things that I'm sharing now. And it was gut wrenching. And I was like, fuck, man, there is no way that this is going to be accepted. And the facilitator of the class, her name is Jen Galvin, amazing human being. She looked at me with the most amount of empathy and compassion. And she was like, your story is so inspiring. And that's what I needed.
mm-hmm.
And so when she said that, that kind of ushered in my podcast. And I started doing podcasting. I started inviting guests. I shared my story at the beginning because I felt like I lead from the front. but also periodically through time, certain milestone episodes, I'll do an update. So, like episode 100, I did a big update, life update, because things changed. So, part of the change was that at the end of 2022, my marriage to the woman that I entered into recovery with, who had seen me at my worst, went, in a matter of 4 days, said, I'm not happy. I don't want to be married. I have a house and moving out. And there wasn't anything I could do to stop it. And I sat alone in this house that we had built memories in for 2 weeks. And it was fucking traumatizing. And it was terrible. And it was isolating. And it was painful and all the things. But the one thing that I found out, like, and I found this out over the past years, the pain is the catalyst. Pain is the catalyst for our change. So I had to go through that to get to where I am now. And so at the end of that 2 weeks, I ended up flying back home and spending time with my dad. And I only meant to stay a month. I packed enough clothes for a month and I said, I'm going to stay for a month. I'm going to go back to Alaska and I'm going to work all this out because there was promises made and then promises not upheld. So I was kind of like in limbo where I felt like I was at. But the moment I touched down in Maryland, in DC, I got messages from everybody that knew the both of us and told me that she had been cheating on me and had been for a while. So I made the decision I didn't need to go back home. I didn't need to go back to Alaska. I needed to stay where I was. And that was painful too, because I just wanted to be back home with the woman that I was madly in love with. After that one situation, there was no abuse whatsoever. I actively took care of her when she was injured, and it hurt because the effort that I had put in wasn't reciprocated. And then there was the manipulation that was happening and the abandonment that was happening, and it touched a wound that I didn't know was there. And I didn't even know how to identify it really.
Yeah, that's what
And
we do.
so, yeah, yeah. And so I re-engaged into therapy here. And the first question that my therapist asked me was, how do you know if you feel loved? And I couldn't answer that question. And then she asked me, okay, um, do you know what love is? I couldn't answer that question because I didn't know. I knew what it felt like. I just didn't know what it actually was. And so I did a deep dive on love. And I learned that in order to love myself, I had to learn to love other people. And so by proxy, like, and that's a terrible way of saying it, but that's, I guess, lack of better terms. By proxy, I learned that I can love myself by loving other people unconditionally, not with any conditions or any boundaries,
Yeah.
just that unconditional love. And I had a semblance of what it looked like because my grandfather showed unconditional love to everybody that he was around, even the people that hated him. I mean,
Okay.
up until he passed, my father hated him, and my grandfather still loved him nonetheless. And so I learned that unconditional love for him, or from him, and I started adopting that in my life and how I showed up for people, how I interacted with people, and the words that I chose to speak to people because words give power, but they also bring death. And so I started using that, but I still wasn't on the path that I am now. And I was running interviews. I'd started up a second podcast and it was called Beyond the Veil. And I was interviewing people that were in the paranormal field because I love that shit. I love it. I
I
mean,
like
I grew up watching,
that. Beyond the
yeah,
veil.
yeah, yeah. I grew up watching like Ghost Adventures and like when or Ghost Hunters, and when Ghost Adventures came out, I loved it. Right. So I wanted to see other people's experiences because they vary. And there was a woman that had popped up. She was like, I'm a psychic medium. And I was like, cool. And so we recorded together. Great woman, phenomenal woman. The work that she did was amazing. Afterwards, she was like, Sean, you have shamanic healing. And I was like, me? No,
You're like,
don't.
what?
I don't. I was like, A, I don't even know what a shaman is, and B, I'm nobody special. I'm just a dude behind the screen. And she was very persistent. She would let me know repeatedly that this was my path. And at first I was like, no. But the more she kept saying it, the more I was like, okay, maybe she's, maybe she's right. I still didn't pursue it. And I found out that she was going in for surgery. She had brain tumors and she was going in for surgery to have them removed. So I went to check up on her prior to her going in. And I said, I told her that, I just gave her words of encouragement going into surgery. And she said, I'm not making it out, but I want you to know this little thing that I've been told. And she said, your teacher's going to come to you. Don't go searching for your teacher, but you are a shaman and your path is like opening up right now. And I was like, nah, just you'll be okay. I'll see you on the back end of this. And then so like a week later, saw her name pop up on my messenger and I reached out to her. And I was like, oh, I hope that I hope you're feeling better. And the response I got was, this is her mom. She didn't make it out of surgery.
Oh wow.
And that fucking hit me hard. But then I made it my life choice, like my life mission to walk this path because my friend Megan had told me that this was my path. And she pinpointed things. She told me things about myself that I hadn't really talked to anybody about. And so I started on the path, but I didn't like necessarily have a teacher at the time. I was going to like Books a Million or like Barnes and Noble and finding books that I could about shamanism, which is there's not a lot. It's a very niche, small group of us, especially around the world. And so I was just still searching for guests for the show, and I this woman pops up and she's like, "Yeah, I'm a psychic medium." I'm like, "That's cool, but like I've had psychic mediums on before. What differentiates you from them?" And she said, "I'm a shaman."
Mm.
My ears popped up because I've never heard that before. And then I said, "Okay, tell me more." And she said, "I teach classes," and that's all she needed to say. She offered like a free 3 day session. Within 30 seconds of being in that session, I already decided that's where I needed to be at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That class wasn't shamanism, it was life coaching. It was a lot of shadow work, but it wasn't shamanism. It was great. It taught me the things I needed to learn at that time. It opened up a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
It taught me shadow work, which I never really knew what shadow work was. I just knew the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I started like getting linked in with healers in my area. They would do work on me. I couldn't necessarily do work on them because I didn't have any work to present to them. And I felt supremely uh, below them. And it wasn't like I was trying to get to their level, but I had a gift and I was not using it and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to use it. So I ended up searching out, last year, I searched out a teacher or I searched out shamans, right? Like shamanic institutes in the United States. And there was one that popped up in Los Angeles, and that is one of the shamanic healing institutes, but that is by pretty much the godfather of all Americanized shamanism, and his name is Michael Harner. He's no longer with us, but he created that institute. He went to Peru and all over the place and did a ton of different studies
Mm-hmm.
about shamanism and about rituals and ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found another one that was in Annapolis, an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't speak volumes to me, I didn't know it would. So I ended up contacting this teacher and I was sharing my experience with him. He's like, dude, you're a lot more advanced than a lot of the students that I see. You have a greater understanding of things than a lot of the students I have. So I started his class and quickly I learned that there's a difference between a shaman, a shamanic healer, and a medicine man or woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you first start your training in shamanism, you get gifted the right of medicine man or woman, meaning you can practice herbal medicines, holistic medicines, all that stuff. Nobody's going to ask a question. Then you got shamanic practitioner, which is the second right that you get toward the end of the class. And that is you can perform ceremony and ritual with individuals, but you don't have the rights to give away the rights that the teacher has. And then being gifted the right of shaman, meaning that I can actually go out and train people and I can go out and create new shamans, which to me, I'm not in that phase right now. Right now, I'm in the phase of like helping people heal. But in the process of that, in the process of these classes, I was experiencing what we were going to talk about in that next class the week prior to that. So I had experience walking into it. And it was crazy because that was the common theme. Like literally, my teacher would tell me what the class is, and he'd be like, "Okay, do you have an update?" And I would explain this stuff, and he's like, "Well, you've already experienced it, so let's go into the ritual. I don't have to explain it to you." And one of the biggest ones, one of the most gripping ones, was this last module that I did. Um, no clue what it was about. I had gotten back from uh, one of the classes that I was doing, and the next class was the following Thursday. And or no, sorry, I gotten back on a Thursday, and my class was the following Thursday, and the event happened on a Friday. So I was sitting there in the backyard, was getting ready for my full moon ceremony. I was cutting branches off the trees and everything like that, so I could start my fire and all that stuff. I came back in, jumped in the shower, got out, and I saw my phone ring from my cousin, and my family never calls me. They don't message me. Not that they don't care. I live more than an hour away from everybody. So calling me wouldn't make sense. They only message me or call me around holidays to see if I'm going to show up. So, like him calling me, I was like, man, I got this really bad feeling about that. And I grabbed my phone, and before I could answer it, I knew what it was about. I picked up, and he was like, I don't know how to break this to you, but like, Grandpa died. So, obviously, there's that like human side of me that feels that pain, feels that loss. But my grandfather was my hero. He was the man I looked up to. He's the man I modeled my life after. And he's no longer here. You know. So I go to my spiritual team and I tell them what happened. And one of my friends, she also doubles as a death doula. She was like, I see your grandpa. And I could see him waiting to get crossed over. So I had to cross my grandfather over in the hospital. And that was hard. But the crazy thing was the next class I was walking into was about death and dying. And that was a hard one. That was an extremely hard one, right? Because like all these experiences that I had leading up to that dealt with other people. Like I was working with other people that had nothing to do with my personal life, and this one was personal for me. But it taught me a huge lesson, and that's not to get too attached to people or things because they can be gone like that. But I graduated and I completed my program, and I'm a full-fledged shaman now. And I do shamanic healing with people. I build medicines and tinctures, holistic medicines and tinctures to help people where Western medicine has failed them because it failed me, much like it's failing millions of vets around the country. And I've been on pharmaceuticals for a year now. I feel so much normal than I ever have. One of the questions that you asked me, the reason why I responded to your post is you said, has anybody healed past their trauma? And I have. And I did it in one of the most unorthodox ways that I've ever seen that. It was by a counselor, probably the best counselor I've ever had. And he sat in front of me, he said, think of an event, a traumatic experience that you had, and I want you to write a brief synopsis about it. So I did. And then the next session I came in and I read it. And he was like, now rewrite it. And I did. I did that for a month. And then he was like, okay, now I want you to go in full detail, everything that happened from the start to the finish. So I did, and I read it. And he was like, okay, now I want you to do it again. And I did that again over the span of a month.
Oh, wow.
And the cool thing was, every time I rewrote the story, something was added to it because I remembered it unlocked a piece of my memory, which
Mm-hmm.
traumatic brain injury attacks your memory. So my memory is starting to come back to me. I'm starting to remember these things. And then the last bit of it, the last of the 3 months, he said, okay, now you're going to write down the experience front to back, and you're going to fill in feelings and emotions that you felt in the time, or in retrospect, what you feel now looking back at it. And that was hard. That was hard because I'd never talked about my feelings and my emotions at that to that point.
Yeah.
I had never addressed any of the trauma from when I was a kid. I didn't address losing my best friend downrange, none of that. But at the end of it, like, it was so painful and it was so gut wrenching and it fucking hurt so bad. But on the back end, all the triggers went away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of the triggers that I ever had went away, disappeared. I don't get triggered for shit now. I still feel feelings, right? I don't get triggered for shit anymore. Somebody can cut me off on the road, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what they have going,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the grace. That's a part of learning, like, to heal, is that, like, is learning to take responsibility for our actions, our behaviors, and how we respond to other people. I caught myself the other day actually, you know, going through the process. I had a really, I exited a relationship last year that was, I had a deep connection to this woman, like real deep, like the deepest I ever had with somebody. And I was crushed in the end and heartbroken in the end. And so I spent a lot of this last year just healing from that breakup, because it was a rough one. It was a traumatic one. And she reconnected or reached back out to me in June. And I responded, I don't want to have a conversation unless you're able to take accountability and responsibility of your behaviors. And then I re-engaged with her a few days ago and I said, hey, look, right, like, there's some things that I want to say. You had the opportunity to say what you wanted to say. Now there's an opportunity for me to say what I want to say, and I feel like I need to say it. And she shut me down real hard. Kindly, but she shut me down hard. And instantly my brain reverted back to who I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Attack. Go on the attack. Make her feel like shit. But what would that do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I started typing this message out on the phone, dude. I was like,
Yeah,
and
just go.
I stopped, and
Yeah.
I looked at my phone, and I verbally said, like, Sean, is this the route you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, it's not. I deleted everything. And then I went at it again. I stopped because it was still ego, right? Like, I'm still
Yeah.
operating from a space of ego, not from a space of healing. And I stopped. And once again, I was like, Sean, is this the route you want to go? No? Okay. Delete. My response was, cool. Nothing has changed. Peace. Right. I don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah.
But that's part of that's part of the healing, is recognizing that old pattern, recognizing that shadow.
Almost done.
It's recognizing that shadow and incorporating it, integrating it, right? Like, bringing it into yourself and giving that shadow grace, and recognizing that we're still human and we're still fallible. Like, as a
Mm-hmm.
society, I think that we live in this very skewed one way of thinking, right? And you said it, there's multiple pathways to heal, and I've taken multiple
Yeah.
pathways to heal. I found the one that worked best for me, and it's great. But I think, like, we get stuck in this one track mind where, if you don't agree with me, you hate me, and that's the furthest from the truth. I
Mm-hmm.
think we've lost sight of ambiguity. I feel like, as a society, we've lost sight of living in duality, where
Mm-hmm.
more than one truth can be
Yeah.
present at the same
Peaceful.
time. Right? Like I can disagree with you, but I can still love you as a human being.
Yep.
I may not appreciate or respect the decision that you made, but I respect you and appreciate you as a human being. And I feel like we fall short of that, and that's where I live. I live in that gray area of like multiple things can be true at one time, right? And I think recognizing that in those hard moments, I think no, it's okay. It's all right. I think like living in that space,
Okay.
I
Well,
think living in that space and like being able to see multiple truths at one time is like really beneficial. And that's part of like the overlapping lesson that I've learned is throughout time is that there can be more than one or two truths real at one time, right? And that my truth isn't the only truth that's present. There's another person's truth. And then somewhere in the middle there is the reality of the situation. I've
yeah.
done a ton of work on I've done a ton of work on myself. Even over this past year, I've done a ton of work. I did a trip to Wales where I went to a Nordic shaman class, which was great. It was presented by the lead singer of one of the folklore Nordic bands I listen to called Highland. Their their front man Kai is a shaman, and he works in the Nordic path of shamanism. So I got to learn from him, and it's just crazy because like I am Norse pagan, and I don't necessarily believe in the monotheistic version of God, but I believe in Christ consciousness. I guess we could call it esoteric belief structure. You want to call it that, but I call myself being a human, right? Having being a soul in a human experience, and so I got to experience that, and it was awesome because I got to reconnect to my roots. I guess where I was getting at with that was I did 23andMe a few years ago. I found out I'm Irish, English, and Scandinavian, so that all links in with the Nordic path. And for me, like connecting to my ancestral root was like the one thing I was missing. And to be healed, completely healed, is because like Europeans, Asians, and everybody that was outside of America that wasn't brought here by people 200 300 years ago, they can walk outside their door and they can walk to a local cemetery and follow their lineage right there. We don't get that. And
Yeah.
that's where we're so disconnected, right? That's why like the rest of the world is so advanced in spiritual practices outside of America is that they have the connection to their ancestral root. They know who they are, and we are so fucking confused.
Yeah. I
We are
agree.
so lost.
I took a shamanic traditions class for my consciousness major
Yeah.
last quarter,
Yeah.
and that was me finally like digging into my roots too, and like being
Yeah.
able to reconnect. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know
Absolutely.
how powerful that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, just like, and then on top of that too, when you start to do the work on yourself and you start to like actually uh build yourself back up, people are noticing, people see you, and then the spaces that you weren't invited in before you become invited in, right? Like a dude like me, I would never be invited into the LGBTQ space. You know what I mean? Like just me. I wouldn't be allowed. Tatted, bearded white guy, bald white guy would not be allowed. When I started healing and I started doing the work and I started showing up and I started being present and showing my face around some of these spaces, they were like, come on in, dude. Like you're accepted, you're loved, and you're cared for. And so now, literally next week, I'm going to be teaching core shamanism at a massive LGBTQ retreat here in Maryland. It is
Oh
great.
wow.
I'm excited. Yeah, doors open up when you start doing work and you start making yourself known. You step out of the shadow, out of your own shadow, because like nobody's casting a shadow on us. We're literally standing in our own shadow and wondering why we can't be seen or we're not visible.
Right.
And so, like for me, I stepped out of my own shadow and I've been accepted into all these spaces to help people here. And like the coolest thing about that is like when people say, "Oh, you helped me heal," no, no, man, I'm just the doorway. I'm the hollow bone. I'm the person in which the energy flows through to get you to a space that you need to heal. I'm not doing shit. I'm
Mm-hmm.
literally all these ceremonies and these rituals that were taught to me by my teacher, who was taught by his teacher, who was taught by his
Mm-hmm.
teacher. There's a lineage there.
Yeah. It's like
And
showing
so,
them their own ability to be able to heal themselves.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's what this is all about is literally people are healing themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't save anybody. Nobody saved me. I saved myself with the assistance of my higher power and with the assistance of
Mm-hmm.
my guides and my guardians. But at the end of the day, man, like humans got to realize that you can only save yourself. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it for somebody else, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I had to learn that hard lesson too. I used to be one of those, like, I had that savior archetype going for a while,
Yep.
wanting
Yep.
to save others and help. I want to help them, but yeah, nobody, like, I don't believe anyone needs fixing or, it's like they just need, I guess, the right conditions to be able to,
Yep.
yeah, heal themselves.
And another big thing that I see all across the board is like fear, right? Like a lot of people are terrified to step out, right? Terrified to be seen, like fully, terrified to be seen fully. Uh, they're terrified of success, but terrified of failure, right? They're terrified of being seen, but they're also terrified of not being seen. There's
Mm-hmm.
this huge, just clusterfuck happening right now where people are just living their life based out of fear. And I can understand. I mean, look at the climate of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But the climate of the world doesn't determine how we operate individually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once people can step out of that fear and step aside from that fear and realize that it's just their brain, try to talk them out of the good things in life and keep them content, keep them, calm and subtle and caged. I think we're just going to continue in this loop. It's about breaking cycles, man. Broken so many cycles over this past 6 years of my sobriety. That's insane. So it's about breaking those cycles, dude. There's just a ton to healing, like just a
Mm-hmm.
ton to healing, breaking cycles, addressing your trauma, talking about the problems that really
Mm-hmm.
hurt. Yeah.
So, no, I love your story because I resonate with a lot of parts of your stories for sure. And I know there's a lot of people out there that'll resonate and actually need to hear stuff like this.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It is possible to heal. I think I don't really want to dive down the rabbit hole, but I'm gonna dive down it real quick. Do- Doctors are paid to keep you sick
mm,
because there's no money when people get healed. There's no money when people are okay.
mm-hmm,
So they're paid to keep you sick. The intention is pure. The execution is not.
mm-hmm. It's like I think there are a lot of doctors that are even unconscious of that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of doctors that are unconscious to that, right? If we look at some of the biggest epidemics happening in the country now, they surround pharmaceutical medications
Mm-hmm.
being abused. And I know that it's on the people. I just watched a documentary today. I love professional wrestling, and they were telling a story about one of this old wrestler named Big Boss Man. And he was like this model employee. He was a model citizen. Everybody loved him. He was the like one of the biggest things since sliced bread. And he started feeling pain, and he was literally getting prescription drugs refilled at like 280 to 300 pills per refill. And this was happening multiple times, multiple locations in the same city, and nobody's cross checking. So they bred addiction and continued to keep him in active addiction. He ended up getting clean and sober and passed away sometime later. But it's the fact that that pharmaceutical companies are getting paid to keep people sick and get people addicted. And then when they say, "Hey, look, I want help," they just push Suboxone or methadone or some of these other substances on them, and it's like you are keeping people sick, and you're not introducing actual healing that can benefit people much later on down the road. That's my rabbit hole.
Dang. Yeah, so I definitely want to get into this. Why don't we take like a pause and then we'll come back for a part two.
We can come back for part two.
Um, but yeah, if you want to tell people where they can contact you right now too, you can go
Yeah.
ahead and do that right now, and then we can take a pause and then go into
Yep.
part two.
So yep. So you can find me anywhere. You can find me on Facebook. I am Sean Young. I have a ton of different pages for the things that I do. So my shaman work, Sober Shaman Sean. Recover Out Loud has a Facebook page. If you go on Instagram or TikTok, I'm Sober Shaman Sean. Just got a big beard if you're listening in. If you're not seeing, I have a big ass beard and I'm bald.
Awesome. All right. All right. Well, we're definitely going to have a part two, so you guys stay tuned for that.